about their children, and it is crucial that schools work to ensure that parents are involved in decisions about their children. And we will be publishing the draft guidance shortly, and there will be a full public consultation on our proposed approach.
Sir Peter Bottomley, Father House.
Can I say to the Minister that we need to trust parents, and we should tell children to trust parents, and that we're right not to confuse sexual orientation, gender confusion and other things. And schools really do need to say to children and to parents, you can trust us as a school to let you know if your child's in distress.
Minister.
Well, I agree with my right honourable friend, but parental involvement is important in all these matters. They are very sensitive matters. So there is a difference between what the honourable gentleman, the right honourable gentleman, spoke about, where a child who is confused about their sexual orientation or other personal problems having a confidential discussion with a teacher. It's a difference between that and big decisions about gender transitioning, for example, where parental involvement is important, and any decision about such matters does need to be taken with parental involvement.
William Cates.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last year, a YouGov poll found that around 80% of schools now have pupils who are trans-identified. And Policy Exchange recently reported that 4 in 10 schools are operating policies of gender self-identification. Now, Dr. Hilary Cass has said that social transition is not a neutral act, but a psychological intervention with unknown consequences for children's welfare. So does the Minister agree with me that the new guidance for schools must make clear that teachers are not qualified to make this psychological intervention, that the only safe approach is to protect children according to their biological sex?
So, as my honourable friend will know, we are now producing guidance for schools on this very sensitive matter, and draft guidance will be available shortly, and we'll consult on it. And to provide the clearest possible guidance, we are intending to consider pieces of work such as Dr. Hilary Cass's independent review of gender identity services to children and young people, which of course is still ongoing.
Dame Angela Riedel.
Mr. Speaker, there is very good guidance already which the NSPCC have written, and I hope the Minister will be taking account of that as he develops the government's guidance. Does he agree with me that this is a situation now that's been very, very highly politicised by particular people to the detriment of those children and the teachers that are trying to do their best in difficult circumstances? So will he explain why on earth it's taken the government this long to publish guidance, essentially leaving teachers without government guidance in a very, very contested area? When will he actually support the work that teachers do?
We do take into account advice from experts such as the NSPCC in drafting our guidance, and of course Dr. Hilary Cass, as I've just mentioned to my honourable friend. Look, we have to get this guidance right. It is a very sensitive matter. The drafting is happening right now, and it will be published shortly in draft, and then there'll be a full public consultation to make sure that all views are taken into account.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Recent research by Policy Exchange suggests that over 60% of schools do not reliably inform parents when their children express a wish to change gender. Many parents are very concerned about schools keeping them in the dark about such important changes concerning their children. So can the Minister please confirm that parents must be kept informed of such an important change in behaviour of their child?
As I've said, Mr. Speaker, parental involvement is paramount in any decisions about their children, and it is important that schools do work to ensure that parents are consulted before any decisions are made regarding a child socially transitioning. And these are issues that we are thinking about and discussing with experts as we draft the guidance, which will be published shortly, and it then will be available for public consultation.
Secretary of State Annalise Dodds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Schools, parents and pupils who need guidance on these issues are sick and tired of reading conflicting rumours about the government's plans in the newspapers. Will the Minister confirm that the reason for the delay is because the Minister for Women and Equalities doesn't agree with the Education Secretary, who doesn't agree with the Minister for Children, who doesn't agree with the Prime Minister?
No, we're working very closely with my right honourable friend, the Minister for Women and Equalities, and we are consulting experts on drafting very comprehensive guidance on a very sensitive matter. We need to get this guidance right. Many schools are dealing with these issues day in, day out very successfully, but some schools, as the Honourable Lady says, do want advice. They want good quality advice. That guidance is being drafted right now, and it will be published very shortly, and then it will be available for public consultation.
And Lee Stoltz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've had noises off about this in the newspapers and rumours for over a year, and still no delivery. The sad truth is that schools are being left in limbo by a government that's yet again focused on internal battles. Its LGBT action plan collapsed. It's at war over banning conversion therapy, and it's now squabbling over schools' guidance too. Will the Minister apologise to the LGBT+ people who've been failed by this playground politics?
No, there are a range of views, as we've seen in the newspapers, but the government is united in being determined to have very high-quality guidance for schools. This guidance is being drafted. It's in a very good state, and it's ready for publication. It will be published shortly, and then there will be a full public consultation to make sure that all those views that are expressed in newspapers by the honourable member, by honourable members and right honourable members right across this House, can be taken into account as we finalise that important guidance for schools.
Liz Twist.
Question 4, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Throughout the pandemic, the government took its responsibilities to people with disabilities extremely seriously. We all remember the daily press conferences, which almost always had signers present, but that was just one element in a much broader communication strategy which ensured that guidance and information was provided in easy read, large text, audio formats and many others.
Liz Twist.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Many people with disabilities would disagree with the Minister's assessment of the communications and feel that throughout the pandemic the government often failed to provide specific communications to disabled people about their rights and access to support. So what steps is the Minister taking to ensure that public health announcements, public health information and daily briefings are accessible to and reaching people with disabilities, and in particular those with a learning disability?
I thank the Honourable Lady for her question. On the point to do with COVID, I understand that this is something that the inquiry will be considering. On her broader point, she will know that the NHS and social care, publicly funded social care in this country, is under a duty under Section 250 of the Health and Social Care Act 2012 to ensure that patients and people in care receive information in a format that's appropriate to them. And I know the NHS takes that responsibility extremely seriously.
Shadow Minister Yasmin Qureshi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Research from the charity Scope shows that in the last 4 years, the cost of running a disabled household rose from £583 per month to £975. The Conservatives' cost of living crisis has forced disabled people to choose between using life-saving equipment or food. After 13 years of this government, there are now over 1 million disabled people living in poverty. What action has the Minister taken to support these people?
Minister.
The Honourable Lady will know the extraordinary lengths this government has gone to support people through the cost of living crisis. Help is extended to people of all means and abilities, including the people that she's speaking about, we will continue to do what is necessary to help them.
Nicola Richards.
5, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I will take questions 5 and 8 together. This Conservative government is the first government to produce a women's health strategy, and already in the first year we're delivering on our 8 key priorities, many of which are in the major conditions work, from dementia, which is the leading killer of women, and to musculoskeletal conditions such as osteoporosis. It shows that this government is really got a priority for improving women's health across the board.
Nicola Rich.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's essential that the major condition strategy helps improve the care which the NHS offers, especially to women suffering breast cancer. Recently, I visited High Cancer Care with my honourable friend for North Warwickshire to see how they've developed a blueprint for how best to support those affected by cancer. So will the Minister congratulate High Cancer Care for their dedication to patients and families, and will she ensure that the major condition strategy goes as far as possible to offer better, more joined-up care to women across the country?
Minister.
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for her work in this space? I know she's the Vice Chair of the APPG on breast cancer, and she's got personal first-hand experience of the impact of breast cancer too. Absolutely congratulate Cancer Care and all those charities who are supporting women going through breast cancer. It is important that in the major conditions strategy that we're not just looking at improving clinical outcomes, which are important, but supporting the care that women receive as well, who often undergo multiple treatments in difficult and different clinical settings. And absolutely that's a priority in the major condition strategy too.
Tom Randall.
Mr. Speaker, last week I had a long conversation with a constituent who's caring for her husband who's had dementia for the last decade. And we all know there are many people like her, mainly women, who are quietly caring for loved ones who are battling the diseases which are outlined in the major condition strategy. So would my honourable friend agree with me that the experiences of these people need to be heard, and would she agree with me that to encourage them to take part in the call for evidence in this strategy before it closes at the end of this month?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the Honourable Member for Gedling is absolutely right, and I would encourage everyone to go onto the .gov.uk website, because the consultation does indeed close at the end of the month. And dementia, I touched on that it's the leading cause of death in women, but many women are caring for loved ones who are battling the disease, not just for days or weeks, but for months and years. And as I said, it's not just about improving outcomes for dementia, it's about improving the access and support we provide those who care for those with dementia too. And listening to experts by experience is a key priority.
Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We all welcome the major outcomes strategy. But as part of it, I wonder if the Minister could reassure us there are so many conditions which women experience differently from men, particularly in heart attacks, and there is a lack of awareness. Will the strategy look at how awareness of these differences in symptoms to look for can be improved?
Minister.
Well, the Honourable Lady makes an excellent point, and one of our 8 priorities in the first year is improving that access to information. So later this summer, the NHS website will be launching a women's information portal, which is specifically about women's health needs. So there will be information around some of the key conditions that women suffer from, and it will be a go-to, reliable source of information for women on their particular health needs, and she does well to raise that point.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for that response and for the £10 million that the Department have set aside for the breast screening programme in the UK mainland. Minister, Northern Ireland, the numbers of those with breast cancer is rising as well. It's very, very concerning. So what steps can the Minister take to ensure that devolved nations are not left behind in terms of outcomes for women? Thank you.
Well, I thank the honourable friend for his question. He will know that health is a devolved issue, but we are working closely with all 4 nations because we want to ensure that we've got joined up working together, particularly in the screening programme, where we've got some catching up to do post-COVID.
Let's go to topicals with Chris Law.
Topical number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is... Mr. Speaker, this is the first opportunity I've had to pay tribute to our former colleague and one of my close friends, Karen Lumley. It was a privilege for me to call her a friend for nearly 35 years. We all remember her amazing character, her infectious laugh and her ever-changing coloured hair. But also, she was proud to represent Redditch, she was a passionate defender of its people, campaigned hard for the local hospital, and she had public service in her core. Knowing her as I did, she was an amazing friend, and her family, it was a great privilege to know them too, and my thoughts are with Richard, Lizzie and Chris, who are touched by messages received from all sides of the House. God bless you, Karen. Rest in peace. Mr. Speaker, it's June and it's Pride Month, and it's a time for us all to celebrate the LGBT community and all it has to offer. It also is an opportunity to reflect many of the challenges LGBT people face, and I look forward to us looking to see what more can be done, and I also look forward to visiting many organisations who support that community.
Chris Law.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and those of us on these benches would like to share our sympathies as well. Mr. Speaker, it's simply not good enough for the UK Government to absolve itself of responsibility of the abhorrent practice of forced adoption, which affected hundreds of thousands of families from the 1940s to 1970s. Rather than apologise on behalf of society, will the Minister finally find a backbone, acknowledge the state failed to protect those affected, and commit to issuing a formal apology on behalf of the UK Government, as the Scottish and Welsh governments have already done?
Minister.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his comments at the beginning, and he raises a very important point. And obviously that's not within my portfolio area, but I will certainly take up the issue he has raised today with the Minister responsible and come back to him if you allow me.
Dr. Luke Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Recently, residents of Hinckley and Bosworth who raised their travel experiences disabled travellers with me. Now, I know the government's concentrating on the inclusive transport strategy, but could the government update me on what that will actually look like tangibly when it comes to public transport, flights, buses, etc., for the likes of my constituents?
Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for campaigning on this issue. Having inclusive transport is important, and he is right that the inclusive transport strategy is integral to our ambition to make fully accessible transport by 2030. My colleagues in the Department of Transport are committed to delivering that strategy to make real practical differences, from accessible platforms through to accessible buses, and we'll be able to update him shortly with more progress.
SNP spokesperson Kirsten Oswald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The UK Government recently published statistics showing a 35% gender pension gap in private pensions, and recent research by the TUC suggests more than 1 in 10 women are in jobs where their employers did not have to enter them into a workplace pension, compared with fewer than 1 in 20 men. And according to calculations from the Prospect Union, that means the income gap between men and women in retirement is now 40.5%, making it more than twice the level of the gender pay gap. So what action is her department taking with Cabinet colleagues to close this shameful gap?
Mr. Speaker, we remain committed to the ambition to remove the lower earnings limit as we set out in 2017. This will proportionately benefit the lowest earners, including women working part-time the most. And I understand the point the honourable lady makes.
Andrew Jones.
Mr. Speaker, last year women established over 150,000 new companies in the UK. That's twice as many as just 4 years ago, and the highest level ever. Yet the level of women founding businesses remains well below that for men. So what steps are being taken to further support female entrepreneurs?
Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend. We're committed to supporting female entrepreneurs, particularly in the high-growth sector. That's why we've launched the Women-led High-Growth Enterprise Task Force, who have found that venture capital is a serious barrier. Currently, for every £1 of venture capital, 89 pence goes to companies led by men and only a penny to women. And that's why getting access to venture capital and funding opportunities is a priority for female entrepreneurs.
Marion Fellows.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to the to research from the Resolution Foundation, the disability income gap is still at 44%, leaving disabled people hugely exposed to the rising cost of essentials in the context of the cost of living crisis. What steps is this department taking with DWP to ensure work coaches and disability advisors actually understand the barriers to employment faced by disabled people, and will the department urge DWP colleagues to consider what additional specialist support could be offered to disabled job seekers?
Well, our disability employment advisor is exactly there to understand those needs and support. I would point to anybody to use the benefits calculator on .gov.uk, and there'll be further cost of living payment support. And the House will be keen to know that the Minister for Disabled People is going to be joining the conference of the States and Parties Convention on the rights of disabled people, and really focusing on how we can get more people into work and progressing and thriving.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What plans?
Please sit. God bless.
What plans has my right honourable friend to amend the Equality Act 2010, which would give us the opportunity to remove caste as a protected characteristic?
Minister.
I have to say to my honourable friend, at the moment the government has no plans to amend that, but obviously we keep everything under further consideration.
Deirdre Brock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Chancellor's spring budget announced measures to get over 50s to return or stay in work, but didn't announce any support for those experiencing menopause. The UK government has rejected most of the recommendations in the Women and Equalities Committee report on menopause, and its chair said it was a missed opportunity to protect vast numbers of women from leaving the workforce. Why hasn't the UK government followed the committee's recommendations?
Select Minister.
We have appointed a government champion on menopause matters, Helen Tomlinson, who's doing sterling work on this. Our 50-plus coaches in job centres are supporting women to progress, and I urge all employers, Mr. Speaker, to focus on supporting women, adjusting the workplace and listening to their needs, so that 50-plus for women can be the most important and progressive and positive time of your working life.
Glenn Saxby.
Speaker, 78% of top UK energy companies have no women in executive director positions. 28% of top UK energy companies have no women on the board. Does my right honourable friend agree with me we need to do far more to help women into STEM jobs?
Minister.
Well, she's absolutely correct. We have made great progress in getting young girls taking STEM subjects up 31%. The challenge is to get them into work. The FTSE Women's Leaders Review has set a target of 40% of FTSE 350 companies having women on their boards. And one of the key ways we're doing that is the STEM Returners Project, getting experienced women back into the workplace and onto those boards.
Go through. Right. Can I just make an announcement? I want to tell the House about the success last night of the House of Commons teams in the tug-of-war. We beat the House of Lords 4-0. So let us now start with questions to Deputy Prime Minister David Johnson.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have been asked to reply. My right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, is in Washington at the invitation of President Biden. They will be discussing cooperation on a range of issues, including AI and global trade, and of course, continuing our leadership in galvanising international support for the people of Ukraine. Mr. Speaker, this week is Carers Week. I know that colleagues across the House will wish to join me in paying tribute to the huge contribution unpaid carers make to our society. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
David Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At the election, the Labour Party committed to abolishing SATs, academy schools and Ofsted, 3 policies given to them by an education union that also opposed this government's use of phonics. And yet, thanks to this government's use and focus on phonics, English primary school children have just been ranked the best readers in Europe. So does my right honourable friend agree with me? This is another example of why, on this side of the House, we have policy to meet the needs of children rather than meet the demands of trade unions.
Deputy Prime Minister.
It won't surprise my honourable friend to hear that I absolutely agree with him. Driving up literacy rates is central to our plan to grow the economy. So I'm delighted at those latest figures showing that children in England are the best readers in the Western world. And why is that, Mr. Speaker? Because since 2010, we've raised the number of schools rated good or outstanding by nearly 30%. And the verdict is clear. Only the Conservatives can be trusted with our children's future.
Deputy Leader of the Opposition, Angela Rayner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Speaking of the last election, the Tory manifesto promised to end the abuse of the judicial review. How's it going?
Well, I welcome the much shorter question from the Right Honourable Lady today. Let me just remind the Right Honourable Lady of a few facts about the COVID inquiry. We set up the COVID inquiry. We have provided it with more than 55,000 documents so far. We have given it all the financial resources it needs so that we can learn the lessons from the pandemic. But, Mr. Speaker, in Wales, they also had a pandemic. And what have the Labour-run Wales authorities done there? No independent inquiry in Wales. As ever, one rule for Labour and another for everyone else.
Mr. Speaker, he acts like it pretends that it's complicated, but it's simple. They set up the inquiry to get to the truth, then blocked that inquiry from getting the information that it asked for, and now they're taking it to court. I know he considers himself a man of the people, so using his vast knowledge of working-class Britain, does he think working people will thank him for spending hundreds of thousands of pounds of their money on loophole lawyers just so that the government can obstruct the COVID inquiry?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, we will provide the inquiry with each and every document related to COVID, including all internal discussions in any form as requested, while crucially protecting what is wholly and unambiguously irrelevant. Because essentially, the Right Honourable Lady is calling for years' worth of documents and messages between named individuals to be in scope. And that, Mr. Speaker, could cover anything from civil servants' medical conditions to intimate details about their families. But I really will say to the Right Honourable Lady, I find it extraordinary that she should lecture us on value for money for the taxpayer, when I understand she has now purchased 2 pairs of noise-cancelling headphones on expenses. Now, I will be fair to the Right Honourable Lady. If I had to attend shadow cabinet meetings, I think I'd want to tune them out too.
Can I just say that Deputy Prime Minister was very good saying he was welcoming short questions. I'd also welcome shorter answers. Angela Rayner.
Mr. Speaker, all we're asking for is what the COVID inquiry has asked for. And across the world, COVID inquiries are well underway. While his government hides information and shells out public money on legal bills for the Oxbridge One, the former Prime Minister is now demanding another $1 million to pay for his new lawyers. Now, I know the honourable gentleman and his former boss has fallen out, and maybe he wants to patch things up. But can he seriously say this is a good use of taxpayers' money?
Deputy Prime Minister.
If we want to talk about relationships between different people, I don't think we need to search her WhatsApp messages to know that there's no communication between her and the leader of her party. And I will happily stand up for our record on COVID, because when she and her party were carping from the sidelines, calling for longer lockdowns, I was working as Culture Secretary to keep our football clubs running, to protect our theatres and museums, and deliver the largest cultural recovery package in the Western world. That's the difference between her and me, Mr. Speaker. While she was collecting titles, I was getting on with the job.
Mr. Speaker, I know for the last couple of years we've been trying to prep Prime Ministers for this, but these punchlines are dire. He really needs to go back to school himself. And speaking of school, thousands of children are missing from school. Absence has nearly doubled since before the pandemic. The Prime Minister says he's maxed out on his support for school pupils. But why did the government abandon its plans for a register of missing children?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, on the specifics of the Right Honourable Lady's question, that is not the case, and we continue to keep the policy under review. And what I would say is I am very proud of this government's record on funding and support for schools. £4 billion more this year, £4 billion next year, and the result of all of that investment is we have the highest standards of reading in the entire Western world. What a contrast from when the party opposite were in power.
Angela Rayner.
So there we have it, Mr. Speaker. Thousands of children missing, under review still. So let me ask him about another, something else that's gone missing. The Public Accounts Committee this week revealed that the government's fraud increased fourfold, with ministers overseeing the loss of £21 billion of taxpayers' money in the last 2 years. Can he tell us how much of our money they expect to recover?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we are working tirelessly to recover those funds and we have made huge progress already. But again, if the party opposite wants to talk about good use of taxpayers' money, what do we have from the party opposite? Plans for an unfunded £28 billion spending spree. And what would that do? Drive up borrowing, push up interest rates, adding £1,000 to everyone's mortgage. Mr. Speaker, I know they're out of touch, but even she must realise that Britain cannot afford Labour.
Angela Rayner.
Mr. Speaker, Britain can't afford any more of the Conservatives. And he seems to have lost count. The answer is a quarter. Only a quarter of the billions of pounds of taxpayers' money lost to fraud is expected to be clawed back. If this government can't get the public money back, they can't be trusted with anything else. It's become a pattern of behaviour from the Conservatives, an inquiry missing the evidence, schools missing their pupils, taxpayers missing their money, and ministers missing in action. And all the while, working people pay the price for their mistakes. This week, the Public Accounts Committee also warned that this epic fraud and waste could happen all over again due to the ministers living in denial of the facts. If his government can't admit the truth, then how on earth can they learn the lessons?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, I would say to the right lady, we're actually putting more resources in throughout this year to tackle fraud and error, and we continue to make real progress with it. But again, it's quite extraordinary from the party opposite. While we are working to drive down inflation and energy bills, what's the right honourable lady doing? Receiving £10,000 from Just Stop oil backers. Oh yes, adopting their policies, backing protesters, blocking new production, and forcing us to import more foreign oil and gas. Do you know what? For once, Mr. Speaker, I find myself in agreement with the GMB union. What did they say? It's naive, lacks intellectual rigour, and could decimate communities, just like Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The latest route update for East West Rail has recently been published, and unfortunately, the link to Aylesbury is still just a dotted line on the map. Now, I've raised the need for this vital link on several occasions in the House because it'll cut congestion on our roads, it'll stimulate the economy, and it will reduce air pollution. Each time I've been asked to work with stakeholders to reduce the cost. I'm really pleased to say we've managed to do that. There is now a much cheaper proposal on the table. So can my right honourable friend now please change that dotted line into a solid line and give my constituents the railway they do want?
I know my honourable friend is an absolutely tireless campaigner for this project, and I can assure him that the Department for Transport is working with Network Rail and the East West Rail Company to consider the feasibility of lower-cost railway links on the Aylesbury spur, and I know that he will continue to make that case very, very vigorously.
We now come to the Deputy Leader of the SNP, Murray Black.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When the Prime Minister took office, he said he would put economic stability and confidence at the heart of this government. Today, UK interest rates are one of the highest in the G20, and mortgage rates are rising nearly back to where they were after the former PM crashed the economy. Is it not the case that this government's biggest achievement is that they're trashing the economy just a wee bit slower than their predecessor?
Well, I don't know whether the Honourable Lady had been following the news today, but actually, again, the OECD upgraded our growth forecasts. And really, one month ago, the whole nation came together celebrating that wonderful moment of pomp, pageantry and pride in our nation. And what did the Honourable Lady describe it as? I quote, Mr. Speaker, a pantomime. Well, the real pantomime is the SNP in Scotland.
Are they black?
I don't know what question the Deputy Prime Minister was asking, but let me try another one. This government plans to cut taxes for the richest, spend £6 billion imprisoning people fleeing war and persecution, and has lost £21 billion to government fraud throughout this pandemic. Is the view from the Prime Minister's luxury helicopter so skewed that during a cost of living crisis he thinks this is what people's priorities are?
I'm going to take no lectures on profligacy from the SNP. And actually, what is it that this government has done? We have provided record increases to the personal allowance, meaning that a person working full-time on the minimum wage has seen a £1,000 reduction in their tax.
Mark Menzies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Fylde has many vibrant small shops that are the beating heart of the economy. But St Anne's Town Centre has got fantastic potential, but its layout, quite frankly, is becoming tired. Investment is needed to reinvigorate the town centre, better connecting it to the seafront and reinvigorate the town. What steps are my right honourable friend taking to continue this government's Levelling Up mission to deliver for towns like St Anne's?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, that's precisely why we've created the Levelling Up Fund, and there's £3.6 billion within that in the Towns Fund to be invested in high streets up and down the country, and we will be outlining the third round of submissions to that fund, and I'm quite sure my honourable friend will make a very vigorous case for his constituency for funding during that round.
David.
Speaker, yesterday I met Karen. Karen is a carer for her husband Alan, who has Parkinson's and Lewy body dementia. Karen told me how hard it is to get people with power just to listen to her. Like so many carers, Karen feels her caring work just isn't valued. At times, she's wanted to give up, but knows she must carry on because of her husband. Mr. Speaker, remarkable carers like Karen save the government more than the entire NHS budget. So will the government finally recognise the value of Britain's family carers and not just pay tribute to them, but give them the financial and practical support they deserve?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, of course I would like to join the right honourable gentleman in paying tribute to Karen and to hard-working unpaid carers up and down the country. And I know the right honourable gentleman speaks from personal experience about this as well. We have provided £2.3 billion worth of support for social care, an additional £25 million committed to putting people at the heart of care in the Heart of Care White Paper, and £327 million is also committed to the Better Care Fund.
Alberto Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Many of my constituents are deeply concerned about the proposals for the 440-acre Hinckley National Rail Freight Interchange and the impact that this proposed site has on the environment and, for example, on infrastructure like Narborough Railway Station. Now, I know the Deputy Prime Minister cannot talk about an individual planning application that is for central government to make, but can he give an assurance to my South Leicestershire constituents, to Blaby District Council like Councillor Ben Taylor, Councillor Maggie Wright, Terry Richardson, Mike Shirley and others, that the voice of my constituents will be heard in this planning application?
Prime Minister.
Well, I know from the vigorous campaigning of the honourable gentleman that his constituents' voice has been and will be heard. As he knows, I can't comment on individual cases. What I can say, Mr. Speaker, is I have experience of this in my own constituency as well, and I know what a blight can be provided by those rail freight projects. So I do have every sympathy for the case that he is making.
Connie Cowan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Deputy Prime Minister, this week we heard plans for 2 universal basic income pilots in England. There have been similar schemes planned for Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. With the progress of the gig economy and the acceleration of artificial intelligence, it's clear that the working environment will need drastically overhauled. Will this government waken up to the reality of the situation and instruct both the DWP and HMRC to engage with these pilots so we can constructively assess the pros and cons and work to safeguard a less precarious future for the next generation?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the government and I have never been convinced about the case for a universal basic income. We're not alone in that. It's also the position of Paul Johnson of the IFS. I think a much better solution is to create more jobs, which this government has done, and cut taxes on working people, which is what this government has done. That is the route for prosperity for people up and down the country.
Ben Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Revitalising Old Way, regenerating our town centres and helping Torbay's high-tech sector to grow would deliver levelling up for Torbay. What expectations does he have of the new Levelling Up partnership in focusing government effort and resources on doing this?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, as I'm sure my honourable friend knows, Levelling Up partnerships are committed to work hand in hand with 20 places across England in most need of that levelling up. They're backed by £400 million worth of investment, and I know that my honourable friend will make the case most robustly for funding for his constituency.
From West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. After 13 years, the government has repeatedly broken its promise to repair social care. Post-pandemic, I've been visiting sheltered housing schemes in Hornsey and Wood Green, and time after time, basic services, dentistry, podiatry, befriending are all missing. Will the government take urgent action and repair this mess, or will it be down to Labour again to pick up the pieces?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, for the NHS as a whole, this government has provided record additional funding, and indeed, since we came to power in 2010, funding is up £70 billion. And in addition, in respect of social care, my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, has provided a further £2.3 billion worth of support to this vital sector.
Dame Andrea Liz.
I congratulate the government for its determination to bring forward the rollout of electronic patient records for everyone in England. And can I ask my right honourable friend to confirm that this gives us a brilliant opportunity to roll out the digital version of the Red Book that is so transformational for every family in giving their baby the best start for life?
Deputy Prime Minister.
I totally agree with my right honourable friend, and I know what a tireless campaigner she has been on this issue, both in and out of government. And yes, I'm happy to confirm that the so-called digital Red Book will be rolled out, and we expect it to be delivered over the course of the next 2 years.
Gavin Newland.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Deputy Prime Minister likes to call himself Mr. Normal. He went to a normal school and he understands normal people. We know that normal people are struggling in this Tory cost of living crisis. People like nurses, who he said had unreasonable wage demands. This is the same person who, on top of his £154,000 salary, charged 2 businesses over 13 grand for just 20 hours work. That's £670 per hour. Does Mr. Normal really think he's worth 65 times a Band 2 nurse?
I'm not quite sure what the question was aiming at, but what I can say to the honourable gentleman is actually this government has provided over £3,000 worth of support to help people through the cost of living. And why have we been able to do that? Thanks to the strength of our economy and the strength of our union. And what's happening in Scotland? The SNP government are putting taxes up on ordinary, hard-working people.
Lake Drummond.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And we're all concerned about the 81,000 children that are not in the school register and under the term home educated. And no one, not local authorities or schools, can honestly answer the question, how many children are not in school? Therefore, how can we know that every child is safe and suitably educated? These children are out of sight and out of mind. The Secretary of State for Education has said that this is one of her priorities, as had the Education Select Committee. So can I ask my right honourable friend to expedite my 10-minute rule bill to place a duty on local authorities to maintain a register of children who are not in school, so that we can ensure that every child is visible, safe, suitably educated and receiving the support to enable them to thrive?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we do want to ensure that all children are safe and have access to an excellent education. And of course, local authorities must seek to identify children missing in their area and ensure that they are safe. The Department for Education continues to undertake work to support swifter identification and greater support of children missing in education.
Neil Griffin.
Well, in spite of government spin to the contrary, the backlog of undetermined initial asylum claims has risen even since December from 160,000 to 170,000 plus. Caseworker numbers are down, returns are still down. So will the Deputy Prime Minister agree to meet me to hear my constituents' concerns about the Home Secretary's plans to commandeer yet another hotel, the Stradey Park in the village of Furness, and explain what more he will do to speed up clearing the backlog so as to return people to safe countries, settle genuine refugees and avoid the need to use the Stradey Park Hotel?
Deputy Prime Minister.
This government will take whatever action is necessary, both to clear the backlog and to stop the boats. And actually, as she may have heard from my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, small boat arrivals to the UK are actually down 20% this year. Our French deal has prevented 33,000 illegal crossings this year. Albanian arrivals are down 90%. We've removed 1,800 Albanians. We've increased the number of illegal working raids, and the legacy asylum backlog is now down 20%.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Samina Halliwell, a 12-year-old girl in my constituency, suffered an horrific ordeal. She tragically then went on to take her own life. She was let down by the system. This week is the 2-year anniversary of her death. Labour-controlled Sefton Council have still got an inadequate rating from Ofsted for children's social care. So will my right honourable friend meet with me to discuss what further measures can be taken to better protect children in Southport and the wider council area?
Deputy Prime Minister.
I congratulate my honourable friend for raising what I'm sure members on both sides of this House will agree is a heartbreaking case, and I know that all our thoughts will be with Samina, her family and her friends. All children, of course, have the right to be safe and protected. I understand that the Department for Education will shortly begin consulting on strengthening statutory guidance to ensure health agencies, police forces and councils work together more collaboratively and end decisions that put children's needs, that prevent putting children's needs at the heart of their work. Of course, I'm very happy to meet with the honourable gentleman and for the Health Department ministers to meet with him also.
Hilary Benn.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. Huntington's disease eventually robs sufferers of their ability to walk, talk, eat, care for themselves and make decisions. It changes the person they were and has a 50% chance of being inherited by their children. Will the government back the Huntington's disease community's call for better access to mental health services, a care coordinator in every area, and specific NICE guidelines so that everyone affected by this devastating condition can get the help they need?
Deputy Prime Minister.
I completely agree with the right honourable gentleman about the devastating impact of this terrible disease. It is the case that we have increased significantly investment in mental health. I, of course, am happy to arrange for Department of Health ministers to meet with him to discuss this further.
Simon Baines.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Wales is the land of song, and there is no better example of this than John's Boys Male Chorus from Rose and Clwyd South, who have performed magnificently in the recent series of Britain's Got Talent, moving Bruno Tonioli and the other judges to tears. Would the Deputy Prime Minister join with me in congratulating the choir and also the other many community choirs in Clwyd South and across the UK who bring such pleasure to the singers and audiences alike?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, I would actually argue that choral music is possibly one of our greatest contributions to global culture, and I really do join my honourable friend in congratulating John Boys Male Chorus for their fantastic achievement in reaching the semi-final of Britain's Got Talent, and I'm sure that they will continue to entertain and engage communities for many years to come.
Paula Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government's post of anti-corruption champion has been vacant for over a year. Does the Deputy Prime Minister think the vacancy increases or decreases the risk of corruption in government?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, in my department, the Cabinet Office, and working very closely with my right honourable friend, the Paymaster General, we are taking extensive steps to make sure we crack down on fraud and waste and make sure that procurement is transparent. And of course, we will be filling that vacancy very shortly.
Gareth Bacon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government do not have any money of their own. Every penny they spend is taxpayers' money, including money spent supporting the economy during the pandemic. So in that light, would my right honourable friend agree with me that it would be disgraceful for a political party to accept huge donations from a company that will simultaneously claiming hundreds of thousands of pounds of public support during furlough?
Deputy Prime Minister.
I, of course, completely agree with my honourable friends, and actually the scheme, the furlough scheme, helped protect around 14.6 million jobs during that terrible COVID crisis. But what do we discover? Labour's taking 1.5 million from Just Stop Oil backers, adopting their policy to block new oil and gas. It's job-destroying recklessness, and it's hard-working people, unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, who will be left paying the price.
Ashley Dalton.
Mr. Speaker, in West Lancashire, my constituents are concerned about their children's education and specifically the ongoing long-term impact of COVID-19 restrictions on their children's educational development. Now, a Public Accounts Committee report out today finds that the Department for Education is failing to take fast and effective recovery action to close the attainment gap in schools. And the department has admitted that it will take a decade, 10 years, just to get the education attainment gap back to pre-pandemic levels. So, when will the government stop blaming everyone else and take responsibility for failing a generation of lost learners?
Actually, before COVID struck, the attainment gap between disadvantaged pupils and their peers had narrowed in both primary and secondary schools under this government. Since COVID struck, we've provided almost £5 billion in education recovery. And I would say to the honourable lady, if she's that concerned about children's education, she should be calling on the education unions to call off their damaging strikes.
Alexander Stafford.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. Maltby Town Council and Maltby Main FC, who play at the Miners' Recreation Ground, are fighting to make sure the ground is financially sustainable and can stay open. But CISRO, who run it, has a history of selling off unprofitable areas to developers, will not allow a full bar to be open, which will provide much-needed capital, which has the support of the council residents. Spaces like our recreation grounds are important parts of our mining heritage. So can my right honourable friend step in to help Maltby Main get the bar that it needs and to help secure the financial future of this ground to ensure it does not face the same fate as the Dingleton Miners' Welfare Recreation Ground?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, may I offer my strongest support to my honourable friend's campaign. I think he's absolutely right to raise it. I do question the extent of my powers to intervene on a bar closure in his constituency, but I will certainly examine what we could do further.
Mohammed Yassin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The East-West Rail announcement proposes a 6-track route which will impact at least 66 properties in Bedford, including the demolition of 37 homes. So will the Deputy Prime Minister tell me why resident concerns have been ignored, and will he give me a commitment today that if the majority of the residents are against the plan in this statutory consultation, his government will not approve the proposal?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Of course we will engage with local communities, but I do find it rather odd that the party opposite have been saying for the past few months about how they want to build more housing, build more infrastructure, and then as soon as there is a proposal to do so, which will enormously enrich that area, it's being opposed.
Sir Robert Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Deputy Prime Minister will know that the calling of an early election in Spain has caused some concern about delay to achieving a treaty between the United Kingdom and the European Union in relation to Gibraltar. Will he confirm that it remains the policy of Her Majesty's Government to prioritise achieving such a treaty once the outcome of the election is known, and that the Government will do all that is necessary to secure that treaty for the benefit of Gibraltar and its Spanish neighbours, and to give all the necessary support to Gibraltar and its British people for their future security and prosperity?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, I can assure my honourable friend that the United Kingdom and His Majesty's Government remain steadfast in its support for Gibraltar, and I can assure my honourable friend that we are working side by side with the Government of Gibraltar, and we remain committed to concluding that UK-EU treaty as soon as possible.
Final question, Fleur Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, the OECD have said that the UK is on course to have the higher rate of inflation than almost all of the other G20 countries. It's families in Putney and up and down the country who will be suffering because of this. Will the Deputy Prime Minister finally commit to introducing a proper windfall tax on the enormous profits of the oil and gas giants and take pressure off struggling households?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, we actually introduced a bigger windfall tax than the Labour Party were proposing. Thanks to that 75% windfall tax, last winter we paid half of people's energy bills, and she talks about the OECD. What she failed to mention was that the OECD today gave the highest upgrade of growth to the United Kingdom compared to any other country.
These questions.